Lam saw Aunt Nuong's eyes light up when she mentioned Ngoc Lan. And her aunt showed Lam pictures of Ngoc Lan from childhood until she became a young woman. Lam has to admit that Ngoc Lan is very beautiful and very similar to Aunt Nuong. During the story, and especially when mentioning Ngoc Lan, Aunt Nuong became very excited. She told Lam about her child's hobbies and Ngoc Lan's memories of her school days. Lam listened and could only stay silent, even though Lam wanted to ask Aunt Nuong many of his questions about Ngoc Lan's story, about her death 20 years ago. It seemed like in his eyes he commented on Aunt Nuong. Something is wrong. Sometimes Aunt Nuong laughed and chattered. Other times she looked around sadly as if looking for something. The already quiet room became even quieter. It's just me and Aunt Nuong. A few times Lam asked about Ngoc Lan. He wanted to meet her, but Aunt Nuong always ignored her and told other stories. But when he mentioned Ngoc Lan's grave, Aunt Nuong's face suddenly changed color, no longer having the lively spirit in her life. Story again. Her voice was slow and sad. That is Lan's second home. The ghosts there still come here to lure her back there. She didn't like it returning to that cold, dark place. So every time there were ghosts that came to take it away. Then it played the sound of the flute for the ghosts to hear the sad passage. It was those sad songs that made them forget the task of taking Lan back to that house. Aunt Nuong's words were like a resounding sound in this quiet room. The story became more compassionate and sinister. Aunt Nuong's eyes contained anger and madness. Lam did not want the story to become complicated, so he asked Aunt Nuong for permission to show off. In fact, Lam's heart was filled with doubt about what Aunt Nuong told her. I'm sure of one thing, this story still has many twists and turns. When seeing Lam out the door, Aunt Nuong gently patted his shoulder and said in a friendly manner, Lan likes you very much. She wants you to come back. Here again. He wants me to paint his portrait. Lam nodded in agreement. He did not speak and did not ask anything of Aunt Nuong, because he knows that asking is useless. Outside, the sun was already rising. The sunlight shining down on the street became more and more intense. The heat rising from the ground mixed with the scent of field flowers. Lam still walked step by step. He was filled with heavy thoughts. The story slowly attracted him. The mysterious and spooky look really makes Lam go deeper into the story. He wants to have a clear truth in current life, not a vague hypothesis. But according to Lam's guess, Aunt Nuong's life is more complicated than he thought. It seems that in this woman's gentle appearance, there are domineering and bold calculations, and in her eyes, there is a hint of sadness. That carpet was ready to act mysteriously. Sometimes Lam noticed unusual things like anger and resentment about something in her. If we encounter a person living in the past, he always puts himself back in the past. Sometimes their madness is unavoidable. Aunt Nuong is the embodiment of a life of pain and loss. What is lost in her is that happiness is out of reach when people cannot grasp and nurture it. Regret is still an eternal desire in them. Deg, mister. Nam entered Lam's room and told him that someone was looking for him in the living room. Lam quickly put on his shirt and quickly walked out of the room. It was surprising because from the moment he came here until now, he had never had an intimate relationship with anyone and had never met anyone in this town. It seems like he sees everyone here. Every time they see him, they look at him with cold eyes, trying to avoid him. When Lam walked down to the living room, he didn't see anyone waiting for him. Lam looked around searching, and suddenly, his eyes stopped. Outside in the garden, in the gentle sunlight of the sunset afternoon, the silhouette of a familiar girl was standing there. The wind blew gently, making the girl's hair flutter with the wind. Still wearing a long purple dress with tiny white flowers, the girl looks like she exudes magical beauty. Lam stepped closer. The girl turned to look at him and smiled brightly. What wind brought this beauty here? What an honor it is for me. No wind brought me here. I found it myself. Lam looked at the girl, shrugged and asked, "How did you know I was here?" The girl smiled. Her smile was still beautiful and in the same pattern as when he first met. The leaves tell me that you are here. So did they tell you anything else about you? The girl shook her head slightly, bent down to pick up a yellow leaf and caressed it. In the late afternoon, the wind often carries the leaves away from the branches, and a few odd birds spread their tired wings to search for the flock. On the horizon, white clouds float lazily. Lamb looked at the girl again. This time he wanted to find the truth in those eyes. Is your house near here? Just 2 old scallop trees from my house. I have something to ask you and hope to receive a sincere answer. The girl looked at Lamb in surprise and asked, "Do you think I'm a liar?" Lamb shook his head and quickly raised his hand to explain, No. Please forgive me for my insensitive words. But I'm new here. There were things that happened to me that were surprising. In this small town, there are many mysterious stories that I cannot understand. What mystery? Can you tell me? Lam pointed at the girl. The first mysterious story is about you. The girl opened her eyes wide in surprise. About you? That's right. I don't know your name. And every time I meet you, it's a coincidence. I don't know much about you, but you know my name and you know I'm here. Is that strange? The girl seemed to understand Lamb's mood. She gently spoke to reassure him. Don't be too stressed, Mr. Lamb. Everything will fall into place. There are things that make you difficult to understand. You should consider life as a book. At first it was confusing and difficult to understand, but the more I read, the easier it became to understand. But for me, the more I read, the more complicated it became. Because you're too impatient. Whatever happens, I want to know about you. It's simple. I'm not as mysterious as you think. The girl smiled at Lam and continued. My name is MoccHD. I live with my grandmother. This year I am 20 years old. For the past 20 years, I have only known this peaceful town. Lam reached out to pick a rose. He carefully broke off the sharp thorns and then passed it to MoccHD. She happily received it and brought it up to her nose to smell it. Ni doesn't go to any school. Ni shook her head sadly. Only then did Lam notice a deep sadness in MoccHD's eyes. I didn't attend any school, from childhood to adulthood. My grandmother is both a mother and a teacher. She taught me very strictly, with no friends or acquaintances. I live more and more distant from the world around me. And you were the first person I met. MoccHD placed the rose in her hair, making her beauty even more radiant. MoccHD's story brought Lam's mood into sympathy. MoccHD's sadness made his heart sob. This was the first time after parting with Feng Kan that he rediscovered the fluttering feeling of his heart. I don't know if it was because of MoccHD's brilliant beauty, or because of her pitiful feelings that made Lam's heart beat, as if she had just fallen in love for the first time. Seeing Lam keep looking at her, MoccHD shyly turned away. She walked closer to the stone bench and sat down. Lam also followed. He spoke to comfort Nai. At some point, children will have friends and will integrate into a new world. Do you like that? I like it very much, but I can't change my fate. I have an oath with my grandmother. Lam looked at MoccHD in shock and asked, What oath? Why did Ni have to swear to her grandmother like that? MoccHD deliberately avoided Lam's eyes and whispered, Don't ask me. Everyone has their own life. Fortunately, God still loves me and allowed me to meet you to confide in you. But I don't know if we will see each other again in the future. Don't understand each other too much. Lam wanted to open his arms and hug Ni into his arms. In front of him, there was a weak girl who needed his protection, but he did not dare to do so. I don't want to be a man who is too confused. Nai is a fragile white flower. You need to cherish that petal. Nai is a pure dewdrop. As long as you move, the dewdrop will break. MoccHD turned to look at Lam. Her expression no longer looked sad. Radiance and beauty are appearing. She playfully narrowed her eyes at Lam, then softly asked, Are there any other mysteries? Tell me about it. Lam sat down next to MoccHD. He still kept a distance from Ni. It seemed he was afraid that if he touched that form, it would disappear like a dream. Do you know the house full of purple flowers on that hill? The house in front of the gate has a trellis of bougainvillea flowers. MoccHD nodded. She looked at Lam and waited for him to continue asking. I went to that house once and met a woman called Aunt Nuong. It seemed to me that Aunt Nuong was living in a magical world. My aunt had a daughter who died 20 years ago. He saw her grave himself, but Aunt said she was still alive, and her ghost came home to visit her and play the flute for her. MoccHD did not react to the story Lam was telling, which made Lam even more surprised. Don't wait for Lam to continue asking. MoccHD reassured him, don't think too much about this. He was truly a brave person and was not afraid to enter that house. Everyone in this town, they curse that house. They think it is the house of hell, of the devil. They want to demolish that house, but they don't dare to do it right away. Because every night, their wives, children, and themselves all see the silhouette of a girl with a mournful, sad flute sound that half begs them, half threatens them. They are very afraid of that flute sound. They think it is the sound of a flute calling souls. As soon as MoccHD finished speaking, her eyes were filled with a deep sadness. But in that sadness, there was a hint of extreme indignation. Lam is still in shock. He only knew this story through MoccHD. Actually, I went to meet a few people in town. When they heard me ask about this issue, they all avoided me. The darkness began to surround. All the sunlight was gathered and fled into the big almond leaves in the front yard. MoccHD stood up and asked him for permission to go home. When, seeing her off to the gate, Lam intended to ask her for a date, but Ni understood and quickly waved her small hand to Lam, smiling and saying, "Look at me as an involuntary wind, just a quick breeze." Without letting Lam say anything, MoccHD's shadow disappeared behind the gate. Lam looked along the deserted road, the silhouette of Ni walking alone. The hem of her light purple dress fluttered in the wind. Her hair was still tied with a velvet rose, looking so beautiful. Lam wanted to quickly run to Ni's side, but something stopped him, seemingly without Ni's permission. He was very afraid of that image disappearing and afraid of Ni's somewhat serious eyes. Lam still thinks love is breathing. It is the heartbeat when the two blend into one. But when walking next to MoccHD, he felt that this girl's heart was a bit cold and icy. Lam does not consider himself the ideal type for many girls, but everyone who met him once had an unforgettable impression. His calm appearance mixed with a bit of gentleness gave him many advantages over other young men. Not really like that. Lam also has very manly things like eyes, smile. Yet walking next to Lam, MoccHD was still as indifferent as a stranger. She was indifferent to Lam's open eyes of trust and love. Little did she know that there was a love waiting ready. Lam gently rubbed his temples with both hands. He didn't want to fall into a tense state. Love has been cold to me for a long time. Now, whether it wakes up in me or sleeps peacefully, my heart has become calloused. Dig, dig, dig. There was a loud voice mixed with the familiar sound of a large motorbike in his ears. Before Lam could look out the door, he saw a huge figure towering in front of him. Chi Thong is still as mischievous and fun as ever. How are you, young man? Have you produced any excellent works yet? Lam looked at his friend and did not answer Chi Thong's question, but instead punched his friend on the shoulder and laughed loudly in response. You devil! Why didn't you call me first when you came down here? Gave you a surprise. Chi Thong sat down on the bed. He took off the shoes he was wearing and threw them under the bed. Conveniently, he took off the shirt he was wearing. Chi Thong is like that. Being careless is his habit. Completely opposite to Lam's personality. Lam is careful and tidy. Lam sat down next to Chi Thong and asked, "Tell me something new. How is your company doing?" Chi Thong shrugged, used a towel to wipe the sweat from his forehead and replied, "Everything is normal. But what I'm most concerned about is you. You haven't contacted anyone all week. How is your work? Looks like you want to base your capital here too." Lam laughed. He was no stranger to Chi Thong's temperament. Still carefree but caring for friends is Chi Thong's #1 advantage. Lam shook his head and replied with a bored look. No progress at all. Maybe it's not the right time for me to show off my talent, or I'm too useless. You're so pessimistic. I've seen your works. Everything is unique. I don't know what else you could ask for. Do you want to have a sublime work? I just want people to admire my paintings with artistic eyes. And I want to have my own work. That is a mark of my true talent success. Chi Thong reached out and patted Lam's shoulder firmly. Both encourage his spirit and remind him, don't be too demanding of yourself, and don't waste effort hunting for your shadow. You should know that your shadow and yourself are together. Lam suddenly chuckled and looked at Chi Thong mockingly. Why do you reason so much today? It's so sublime. I don't understand anything. Chi Thong frowned and looked at Lam and said, just laugh at me. Then there will be times when you will think what I say is right. Lam's face suddenly turned serious. He nodded in agreement with your words. Sorry, I'm so ungrateful. I know you care a lot about me, so you put all your work down here to advise me. How touching. Chi Thong interrupted Lam's words. Don't lie. Your friends are too polite. I just want you to fulfill your dream. Suddenly, Chi Thong stood up and changed the story to another direction. Let's not argue about this anymore. Let's go find something entertaining. Go fishing and ask Mr. Nam to make fried fish. Tonight, my friends and I will have a drink. Lam responded to Chi Thong's suggestion. They both went downstairs together. Mr. Nam has prepared 2 fishing rods for Chi Thong and Lam. Mr. Nam already knows that Chi Thong's personality is that every time he comes here, he likes to go fishing. Lam squinted his eyes at Chi Thong, then whispered in his friend's ear. Mr. Nam understands what you like here. This is the first time I've seen him happy. Chi Thong smiled. He did not respond to Lam's words but ran quickly to the back garden, where there was a fish pond belonging to Thong's family. Lam also ran after his friend, both like 2 children enjoying bathing in the rain, causing Mr. Nam to watch and laugh out loud. Upon arriving, Chi Thong stretched his arms, took a deep breath, and said comfortably, It's been a long time. Not breathing this natural air is truly a shortcoming for life. Lam smiled at you. He sympathizes with Thong because Thong is very different from him. Thong is very passionate about his career and does not back down from any difficulties. Whatever Thong wants to achieve, Thong can achieve at any cost. The same goes for Thong's career. He is currently the director of a foreign invested company, a prestigious position in society, so countless beauties follow Thong. It was he who brought together what many people wanted. Chi Thong looked at Lam in surprise and asked, Why are you looking at me so fiercely? Is there something so strange? Lam shook his head and smiled and replied, Nothing, but a little surprising. The director dropped the beauties down here to sit and fish with this poor guy. Chi Thong reacted quickly by glaring at you. Hey, don't use that fishy voice of yours. Do you believe that if I straighten my legs, you will fly into the pond to be eaten by the fish? As soon as he finished asking, Chi Thong rushed over and threw Lam down on the grass. Lam did not react in time and he was passive and let Chi Thong do whatever he wanted. Chi Thong's hands were strong and firm, clasping Lam's body tightly. Then, let Lam struggle. Chi Thong still did not let go. The 2 struggled on the grass, their laughter echoing throughout the whole corner of the yard. Chi Thong and Lam spent an entire afternoon entertaining, but they still couldn't catch a single fish. Chi Thong is inherently hot-tempered. He put down the fishing rod and said dejectedly, What bad luck. Didn't catch any fish all day. It's true that fish have eyes. Lam shrugged and replied, It probably hates us so it refuses to take the bait. But don't you worry. Mr. Nam is preparing fried fish at home. How do you know there is fried fish at home? My nose is very sensitive. I can smell the scent of fish. Chi Thong raised his hand to pat Lam's head whenever he was pleased with something. Chi Thong often expressed his sympathy by patting other people's heads. Lam is familiar with Chi Thong's habit. They both walked into the house. True to Lam's words, Mr. Nam prepared fried fish on the table plus a plate of fresh green vegetables and a cup of spicy and sour chili fish sauce. Looking hungry at the food on the table, Chi Thong and Lam could not avoid their bad habit of gluttony. Chi Thong inhaled and laughed loudly as he sat down on the chair. There are drinks and glasses on the table. He held the bottle of wine up high, looking at Lam through the milky white color of the wine. Tonight may be our long night. Lam smiled and looked at you in response. It's okay if you have good wine to drink with your best friend. Chi Thong poured a full glass of wine and brought it to his mouth to drink. Invite friends. Mr. Nam did not sit back and respond with Chi Thong and Lam. Even though the two begged hard, Mr. Nam still tried to refuse. His eyes filled with joy as he looked at Chi Thong, who was excitedly cheering. He quietly withdrew to make room for two friends who had not met each other for a long time, so that they could express more of their natural openness and friendliness. Thong pushed the bottle of wine to Lam after pouring himself a full glass. Lam also poured a glass. The two clinked their glasses and drank, then let out a comfortable sigh. Chi Thong says, "As far as I know, you just finished a painting here, right?" "Yes, but not very special." Chi Thong is naturally a curious person. "So, who is the girl in the picture? The new lover?" "Simply the girl in the picture." Lam looked at you. The alcohol made him more excited. Lam raised his eyebrows and asked Chi Thong, "How are things going with your wife and children? When will you invite me to the wedding?" Chi Thong did not raise his head to answer because this fish dish was too attractive to him. "How about the young director? How many models are waiting in line?" Chi Thong interrupted Lam's words. He picked up the bottle of wine and filled Lam's glass. "Don't worry about my business. Let's talk about you. Have you caught any girls?" "I yet." Lam smiled softly and replied, "Black eyes, let alone blue eyes. Hearing your voice is not exciting at all. Why are you so careless about life?" Then Chi Thong stood up and shouted loudly, "Life is pink. Enjoy it before it goes to waste." Lam said nothing, raised the wine glass high to look at Chi Thong's face through the glass. Taking a long breath, he put down the glass, enjoying the strong and spicy taste of the wine to the bottom of his heart, the alcohol reducing the tension in him. He shrugged and said, "If all this life is rosy, then the earth will be peaceful and perfect. No one will fight for power. There will be no rich and poor. Children will not have to live a wandering life of hunger and poverty." Chi Thong frowned. It wasn't the alcohol that made him spicy, but Lam's words were too bitter. "Look, when did my young friend suddenly become a philosopher? In everyone's eyes, is this world ever perfect?" "Well said. Give me a drink." Lam put the glass of wine in front of Chi Thong's face, and both of them drank it. Actually, Lam did not want to discuss this issue with Chi Thong, because he understands that he and Chi Thong are living in two different concepts. Although they both pursue a common goal of striving for the advancement of young talents, a future business owner, and the two also have a close friendship, understanding and sympathizing with each other more. Chi Thong put the glass on the table and looked at Lam, waiting for Lam to pour more wine into his glass. Chi Thong's eyes sparkled. The alcohol made Thong tipsy. He mumbled, "Tonight is a long night. Drinking with friends won't make you feel drunk." Lam did not listen to Chi Thong's words. He was pursuing his own image. Strange images of previous nights kept flickering in his mind. Unable to keep it in his heart forever, Lam confided to Chi Thong, "Do you believe in this world that there are souls around us? There are strange phenomena that cannot be explained. Every midnight, that soul transforms into a ghost and wanders alone. The ghost carries injustice and does not know who to confide in. He borrows the sound of the flute to express his feelings and is carried away by the wind. I don't know whether to meet that ghost and ask the reason for the secret thoughts in the flute's music or run away in terror and curse about the ghost that bothers everyone during sleepless nights." Lam looked at Chi Thong. He stopped talking while seeing Chi Thong put his head down on the table and slept soundly. Perhaps the alcohol had seeped in and made Chithong so drunk that he didn't know what was happening to him, including Lam's confessions. Chithong's mouth was still mumbling, "Friends, friends." Lam smiled softly. He helped Chithong sit up and then helped him into the room. In his drunken state, Chithong's mouth still softly called out 2 words, "Friend." Chithong slept in the same room as Lam. Both of them fell asleep after a drunken encounter. In the quiet night, Chithong's snores were clearly heard. Lam only slept for a while, then he suddenly woke up to Chithong's tossing and Thong's heavy hand pressing on his chest. Lam gently put Thong's hand down. He got out of bed as usual because he often has trouble sleeping at night. Lam walked out into the living room in the dim light of the oil lamp, which did not light up the room enough. What surprised Lam was that the 2 windows that Mr. Nam had usually carefully closed, but today suddenly opened. The wind from outside made the curtains move. A stream of air blew into Lam's body. This unusual coldness made him afraid to see her again. Lam stepped back. His instincts told him that something was happening in front of him, and he heard someone breathing outside the window. Lam remained silent, his eyes still not leaving the door. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. At first, a few times, but then suddenly, Lam calmed down and asked, "Someone, who do you need to meet late at night?" There was no answer. The knocking on the door was still repeated. Angry, Lam quickly walked to the door, punched it hard and shouted loudly, "Who wants to cause trouble? Who does he want to meet?" As he asked, Lam opened the door. A dark color appeared in front of Lam. In that dark night, the silence became more and more creepy. There was not a shadow of anyone, not even a single person. Lam looked around, but he couldn't see anything except him alone. Lam pushed the door hard, the anger still not subsided in his heart. When Lam turned his back, he was startled, and his eyes widened in surprise. The 2 windows that had previously been opened were now carefully locked and closed. The room became dark because the oil lamp was also turned off. The space became terrifyingly quiet. Lam was bewildered and had not yet had time to calm his mind. Once again, his heart was beating wildly. In front of his eyes, in the corner of the room, right on the sofa, a light purple light appeared along with the purple silhouette of a person in white clothes, sitting with his back to Lam. The girl's hair hangs down. Her silhouette is familiar. This time, Lam was not afraid anymore. He courageously walked closer to the girl and asked while still looking at the girl with extreme surprise at her mysterious appearance, "Tell me what you need from me. Are you a human being or an unjust soul who needs my help?" The girl remained silent and did not answer Lam's question. The purple light next to the girl is sometimes real and sometimes false. In this dark room, there was no moonlight or stars outside. Lam could not see the girl's portrait clearly. He could only vaguely see jet black hair falling down her shoulders, and the girl was wearing a loose outfit of the same color as that light. Lam took a few more steps, this time only about 2 meters away from the girl. He spoke up full of anger, and his resounding voice tore through the gloomy atmosphere. "I've met her a few times. This isn't the first time we've met. I think I have no debt and no grudge against you. Why do you keep teasing me like that? Who are you really? Speak quickly. Otherwise, don't think I'm being rude to you." Lam took 1 more step, then 2 more steps to the 3rd step. This time, the purple light suddenly brightened. The girl turned to look at Lam. In that bright light, Lam was extremely frightened when he recognized the girl's face. He took a few steps back and leaned back against the chair. He reached out and grabbed the wooden stick tightly, his emotions increasing more and more. The girl's face appeared in the terrifying light. This was the first time he had seen such a strange face. A pale white color covered the face, and it looked like a square piece of flesh with no nose, no mouth, no fur. Only 2 sparkling round eyes looked at Lam. In her sparkling eyes, there were drops of pink blood on her powder white face. Lam could no longer bear to look at that strange face. The girl's face was like a piece of meat attached to a slender body. But he did not expect that the eccentric clothes were placed on her body in such a heavy and large way. When the girl stood up, her body was as tall as Lamb. The girl's head shook as if it was about to fall to the ground. Lamb felt his fingers clinging tightly to the wooden bar of the chair and bleeding from pain. There was wild laughter in the room. Laughter rang out in a long, ghostly chain. Lam heard Chi Thong scream, and he no longer knew the presence of the girl in front of him. He raised his foot to kick the chair that was blocking his exit. The chair fell down, dragging along a large wooden vase placed next to the corner of the house. The vase rolled down Lam's feet, causing him to fall to the ground. His head hurt when he hit the table leg in front of him. Lam still didn't think about it. He tried to stand up and run quickly into the room to find Chi Thong. Pillows were thrown in front of Lam, accompanied by Chi Thong's scream. "Go away! I'm not afraid of any ghosts. Go away! Go away quickly!" Lam raised his hand to answer. "You." "Calm down, Thong. It's me." Only then did Chi Thong calm down. He looked at Lam angrily and asked, "Where have you disappeared to? I just met a ghost girl with messy hair like a crow's nest who came to my bed and looked at me and laughed, thinking I was a coward. But unexpectedly, I put a candlestick in my head. But still holding my head and laughing like a crazy person, Chi Thong still did not hide the anger on his face. He lay down on the bed and looked at Lam and continued, "Stop sleeping. Come back with me tomorrow. Don't stay here anymore. Somewhere crazy and spooky." Lam did not say anything, nor did he tell the story just now to Chi Thong. He knew Chi Thong's personality never believed in ghost stories in this world. There was the sound of Chi Thong snoring. Just then, Chi Thong was already sleeping. Lam looked at you and smiled when he saw Chi Thong's sleeping face still looking angry about the past story. Part 3. The next morning, Chi Thong took all of Lam's clothes and put them in the car, urging Lam to go home. "Let's go. It's true that what my family said is right. There are all kinds of nonsense. Don't think about it. You'll just go crazy." Lam didn't say anything. He quietly took his luggage back into the room. Chi Thong was surprised, followed, and angrily asked, "Are you crazy? You haven't been able to do anything all week. In this final stage, you haven't prepared your works. So, how can your art gallery open at the end of the month?" Hearing Chi Thong mention the painting exhibition at the end of this month, Lam was suddenly startled. He had actually completely forgotten. "It's true that this whole week you don't know what goal you're pursuing?" Just one of his paintings, Sunset. Seeing Lam still standing there thinking vaguely, Chi Thong quickly pulled Lam out the door. But when he reached the living room, Lam shook his head and looked at you and said, "I decided to stay here for a few more days. I have personal things to do. So go back up there and take care of handing out invitations to friends. Then I'll be back on time for the art exhibition." Chi Thong understands Lam's personality. Once you decide on something, it cannot be changed. Thong looked at Lam with eyes full of confusion. He didn't ask Lam anything just when he climbed into the car and prepared to start the engine. Chi Thong recently said, "Anyway, I don't want to interfere in your personal matters, but there's something I want to tell you." Lam reached out and patted his friend's shoulder and smiled. "What's going on? Why is your expression so important?" Chi Thong said with a serious look, "You two are very sad about you. Before I came down here, I went to your house. I feel so sorry for the two grandparents who are longing to have a grandchild to hold." Chi Thong left his sentence unfinished, squinted at Lam, smiled and continued, "This time, come back and get a big girl. If you keep being picky, you'll end up stuck. Well, now I'm lonely. You're talented. Can you help me find it?" "Stop it, Dad. I understand my father's personality." Lam burst out laughing. He didn't have time to ask Chi Thong why he changed his address like that. Then Chi Thong's car engine exploded loudly. The car drove quickly out the gate after waving goodbye. Lam followed his eyes and saw Mr. Nam standing outside the gate. Chi Thong stopped the car and talked to Mr. Nam for a bit before leaving. Lam did not go back into the house. He walked out the gate. He wanted to go for a walk. Honestly, Chithong's words just now made him feel sad. In this moment, he remembered his parents. They only have you in this world. He knew his parents' feelings, even though they tried to hide it, but he still understood. There is a complete distance between him and Chithong. Chithong has both status and is about to get married. Lam only knows that Thong's fiancé is a beautiful and talented company, private secretary whom he met once, and until now, he still sluggishly carries the price to go painting. An anonymous artist, unknown in everyone's eyes. He likes to pursue art, but art does not smile at him. Perhaps his nature is too strict. He is not satisfied with himself. He self-assessed that he was still inexperienced. Perhaps he was putting himself in the position of talented artists in the world. He wanted to be just like them. You are looking for your ego while your ego is still with you. Lam's footsteps brought him to the morning market. This place is still bustling every day, but today is different from usual because of the silence that prevails. Everyone was gathering together to discuss something important, with extreme tension on everyone's faces. Lam forgot his train of thought. He walked closer to a chattering crowd. They were so busy arguing that they didn't notice his presence. One of the noisiest women in the group spoke up. It was horrifying. Last night, I saw with my own eyes a female ghost dressed all in white fluttering on the bamboo top of my house. The girl next to her also added, every night I hear the ghost's flute sound. One night I saw a pale face with only 2 bloodshot eyes. Everyone is competing to talk about that ghost story. Lam didn't listen anymore. He looked around and walked closer to a roadside shop. There was an old woman sitting quietly there. The toad shop only sells a few cans of red and green candy and a few small green rice cakes. Lam sat down on a chair made of wood that had been used for a long time and was now smooth. The woman did not bother to ask Lam what he was eating. She was tiredly holding a fan. Lam spoke softly. "Give me a rice cake, Grandma." The woman gave the green rice cake to Lam and did not say a word, forcing Lam to open the conversation. "What happened at the market this morning, ma'am? It seems like everyone is talking about some ghost story." Her sigh rang out, breaking the silence. She slowly answered, "Just a story from 20 years ago. Now just repeat. In this world, do you believe that there is an unjust soul that has not yet been resolved? I don't know anything. Don't ask me that." Lam bit her lip. He looked at the woman. He seemed to see her face etched with extreme pain and emotion. There were footsteps behind her. Lam saw a young man walk in. He came to her and whispered, "Go inside the motel. I will look after the shop for you." The woman stood up and walked heavily into the house. The young man is completely different from the old woman. He excitedly started talking to Lam. "My name is Min. I've seen you at Mr. Nam's house several times." Lam nodded and smiled at Min, and he did not miss this opportunity. "Tell me, what's going on in this town?" Min enthusiastically said, "Don't you know anything? This whole neighborhood is seeing a ghost, a female ghost. The story is very scary. My grandmother also talked to that ghost." Lam asked in surprise, "Did your grandmother talk to that ghost girl?" Min shook his head and replied, "I don't know, but in recent days, many things have happened. That ghost keeps lurking in the night, so people don't dare go out at night." Lam pretended not to believe. He squinted his eyes at Min. "Did you see anything? Every night he goes for a walk. Haven't you seen any ghosts?" "I'm the same as you. I didn't encounter any ghosts. But hearing people say, 'I'm so scared, I don't dare go out at night.' But my grandmother said the ghost is from a haunted house at the end of the neighborhood. Do you know that haunted house?" And don't wait for Lam to answer. Min quickly continued, "Everyone in this town has distanced themselves from that house. They think it contains disturbing spirits. At night, I often go and tease people." Lam frowned, seemingly not understanding what Min said. Do people here still believe that there are ghosts? You see that house has a woman living there. Min glared at Lam and asked, "So you went to that house? You have to go see the shaman. Watch out for the ghost there that captures your soul." "Calm down. There's no such thing. I'm still sitting here talking to you. No one is capturing my soul. But then, you will be caught." There were a few curious people who came to that house, but they could not enter because inside there were cries and moans. Pitiful. They were so scared that they ran away. At night, the ghost clung to them for nearly a month before letting go. Lam nodded as if he believed what Min said, making him even more excited to continue. But soon, everyone in this neighborhood will unite and go to that haunted house to destroy it. Lam blurted out and asked, "Does the government not stop them from doing what they do?" They all agreed. This town was originally very peaceful, but now they are being destroyed by those ghosts. At night, it keeps wandering back and forth on the road, making everyone afraid, not daring to go anywhere at night. It must be destroyed. Min was still talking about all kinds of stories about ghosts, while Lam stood up to leave. A few people entered the shop. They responded to Min's story. That place, which was still quiet a moment ago, is now quite noisy. Lam put his hands in his pockets and leisurely walked on the newly completed asphalt road. The smell of fresh plastic entered his nose. In this hot and cruel summer sun, Lam's mind is spinning even more. Lam just walked away. He knew that around him unsympathetic eyes were watching him. Lam Hunt just ignored it. His steps became heavier and heavier. Deg deg deg. Lam. 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 There was a woman's voice calling him. Her voice was sweet and clear. She still calls Lam, calling him by his correct name. "Lam, are you learning about my tragic story?" Lam tried to open his eyes and look. His whole body stiffened and did not move. His eyelids were so heavy that he couldn't open them. On his shoulder, the woman's voice still echoed. "I understand your feelings right now. You are in an illusory world between humans and ghosts. I don't believe that ghosts exist in my world." Lam mumbled and tried to make a sound. "Who are you? Why do you keep appearing around me? Tell me the truth whether I am encountering a ghost or not. Please let that truth sink into the darkness. Between you and I are two completely different worlds. I am just a speck of dust existing in your world. What is your world? Where? Is it recent?" Lam tried to sit up, but it was useless. His body was like a cold and stiff block of ice. He couldn't open his eyes. He only heard the sound through the woman's words. "You should not know what my world does. People still think it's a myth. I just thought it was like that." Lam still stubbornly replied, "But I don't know who you are. Why can't I move? Can't I open my eyes? There's no way you can see me. Even if you open your eyes, you still can't see me. Why? I don't understand anything." A light breeze suddenly blew into Lam's face, making him shiver. The woman's voice was still clear in Lam's ears. "Don't learn too many things. In this world, there are things you need to understand, and there are things you don't need to understand. I understand everything. Please live in reality for a bit and don't be stubborn with yourself. Take it easy." Lam shook his head and said, "I don't understand what you're saying. Tell me what you need from me." The woman's voice rang out. "I don't ask you for anything, but I know you can help me when you decide to stay in this town. Do what you can and do not believe what you have seen and heard and my presence. Just a dream. Simply a dream. A dream. A dream." Lam was startled, awake. He opened his eyes and looked around. His whole body was numb and exhausted. Lam's mind was spinning crazy. He was like a drunk person who had just woken up, sweat soaking the shirt he was wearing. He was as confused as a sleepwalker. The dream from earlier had confused Lam's mind. This was a strange dream he had never had before. The woman's words and his responses made him remember them clearly, like they were memorized. He still wondered if this was real or just a dream. Does a dream have a special meaning that needs Lam's interpretation? Lam looked at the clock. It was only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He had been napping for 2 hours, and Lam still hadn't seen Mr. Nam since morning. I don't know where he disappeared. While feeling suspicious about Mr. Nam, Lam suddenly heard the bell outside the gate. He staggered to his feet and went downstairs to open the gate. When the gate opened, a familiar figure appeared in Lam's eyes, causing him to blurt out, "Aunt Nuong." That woman is the Aunt Nuong that Lam met the other day, and is also the person who lives in the ghost house that your town is isolated from. Aunt Nuong still hasn't changed, wearing an ancient Chinese-style black dress and wearing a black scarf that covers her entire face. Maybe she doesn't want people around her to recognize her. Lam invited Aunt Nuong into the house, but she shook her head and refused. "I don't like going to anyone's house, except my own." Aunt Nuong looked straight into Lam's eyes and said, "You promised to paint a portrait of my daughter. Now you should fulfill that promise." Lam repeated Aunt Nuong's words. "Will you paint a portrait of your daughter right now?" Aunt Nuong nodded and said, as if giving Lam an order, "Go inside and prepare everything. I will wait for you to come to my house." After speaking, Aunt Nuong turned and walked away. She didn't wait for Lam to react to her sudden suggestion. Lam was still surprised. He didn't know what he was doing. But Lam also turned his back on the house. He prepared everything necessary. On the way to Aunt Nuong's house, Lam was still in shock. He was having nightmares. Everything that happened to Lam was so surprising and unexpected. Before he could calm himself down, something else happened to him. The story is both wild and magical, making it impossible for Lam to forget. Now he was facing it himself. He needed to do something. The doubt was still smoldering in his heart. Aunt Nuong's house appeared before Lam, still unchanged. The bougainvillea trellis in front of the house was filled with colorful flowers, white, pink, and purple, much more luxuriant than before. The gate has opened wide to welcome Lam. He boldly stepped inside. It seems like the orchid pots in front of the house are blooming sparsely, and Lam noticed the gloom covering the house. "Don't leave a sound." Lam slowly walked in. The desolate scene appeared before Lam's eyes, completely different from the last time he came. Tables and chairs were scattered everywhere, and once vivid water paintings were now lying haphazardly. The huge ancient vase in the middle of the house is now shattered, scattering fragments everywhere. Lam couldn't believe his eyes anymore. He put the easel down at his feet and absent-mindedly looked around the room. "You don't know what to do?" Aunt Nuong's figure has disappeared. He doesn't know where she is now. A light flashed from the attic and the window gently opened. Waist length, hair and a white shirt look even more mysterious in the light purple light. The girl sat silently and motionless. The melodious sound of the flute is played in the quiet space, creating a mournful scene. The girl still did not face Lam. She sat, still on it. Melodious, melodious melodies. The words of love naturally enter the heart of the listener and are truly heart-wrenching. Lam walked quickly to the foot of the stairs. This time he must face the girl up there. Whether she was a ghost or a human, he needed to know the truth. In this story, his footsteps stopped at the door. Aunt Nuong had been standing there for some time. Her words were sharp. "You cannot enter this room. My daughter doesn't like to see you." Lam shrugged and replied, "If I don't like meeting you, how can I paint her portrait?" Aunt Nuong waved her hand to refute his words.